Hi, I'm Gervase Bushe, co-founder of the Bushe-Marshak Institute for Dialogic Organization Development. And I'm here today with the other co-founder, Bob Marshak, to talk about his book, Dialogic Process Consulting, Generative Meaning Making in Action. Good to be here with you today, Bob. Okay. Well, let's talk about the book. So
Sure.
where did the idea come for this book on dialogic process consulting?
Well, one of the places that it came from was you asking me to do it, but the other places is it was I've
So I remember
always
that
had
was
an
that
ear
was
for
over
language.
drinks in the UK, wasn't that?
Yes, it was in
Yeah,
the UK while we were doing a training program together.
yeah.
Absolutely right. So that really was the encouragement to do something that had been lingering there for a long time. I've always been attuned to language going way back in terms of what people said or how they said it, and then that turned into listening to metaphors, and then that turned into listening to kind of themes and things that were absent or whatever else. And I wrote about it, and it became part of my training process and added stuff over time. And for years, people used to ask me, "What is it you're doing, Bob? It's very effective, but what is it you're doing?" And I would try and explain it. So the book became a way of really integrating probably 40 years of my consulting practice, as well as research and ideas generation into one simple place, hopefully, that puts together all the ideas in an integrated framework and in a how to do it form, which a lot of people wanted. So that was really the impetus for the book. Was like, my God, it's finally time to try and put it all together, because I'm crystallizing in my own mind how to explain it to people. So that's how the book started, and that's where it is.
All right. Well, tell us what you think are the key differences between a dialogic process consulting and the traditional process consulting that we all learn from Ed Schein.
Well, there are a lot of similarities, of course. They're both client-centered, and they're both around how-tos more, and they have similar value sets. But at least process consulting, as I first learned it, would have people focus a lot on working with teams at that time, but also larger organizational entities in terms of how they were performing things, if they were in a team meeting, who spoke or when they spoke, or how leadership was enacting, or how conflict was dealt with. And there might be a way to generate feedback, or there might be an observation from the consultant working with them about what they were seeing in terms of the behaviors of what people were doing. Dialogic process consulting focuses on dialogic processes, where the emphasis is more on the notion about how mindsets shape how people see reality, and that mindsets are created through language and discourse and discussion and dialogue. So now in that, you begin listening for not only what people are doing, but you're trying to intuit by the language and discussion the mindset that is shaping what people are doing, with the potential opportunity to influence that mindset in some way to change the behaviors that are occurring. So you're working at a mindset level, not a behavioral level. And your access way in and out of that is through language, metaphors, and stories and imagery that people are created in what they're saying or doing. And if
Having
that's really the
watched you
main
do
difference.
this, and I realize that it's very different from what many of us got trained in doing, and really takes some effort to shift my mindset as a process consultant, watching a team interact and not watching the behavior, but listening for what's behind the thought
Right,
that's making this seem like a sensible thing to say right now.
right.
Yeah. And
And for me, I don't want to say it's a simple way in, but the first access way into it for me is always to tell people, listen to what people are saying, and think of it in terms of, these people are talking as if they believed what they're talking, the particular words and phrases they were using. An example, I went to a team meeting. I had been working with them for a long time, and when I arrived, I had learned that their function was being abolished. And when they talked, people would talk in terms of the rats abandoning the ship. We're sinking. It's the deck of the Titanic. They were using all these words and images that had them aboard a sinking ship. Now, they didn't say we were on a sinking ship. They didn't say, what are we going to do about it? But the way they described what they were doing included all that imagery. And I simply said to them, well, it sounds like you're on a sinking ship. What if you're just transferring from that ship to something else for another destination? Which was an invitation to stop talking about it as if it was the end, as opposed to it was a transition to something else. Well, for whatever reason, it tickled their fancy. So people started saying, well, I'm going to get a jet ski and I'll shoot over here, or this is my chance to always go to the island of my dreams, or I'm going to get on a sailboat and go someplace else. So now they shifted from doom and gloom and the end of the world into at least talking about that there were other places to go. But the pickup on it was listening to language that was not about transitioning, but about termination. And the invitation to think in terms of transition opened up a new way of them thinking about things and shifted the mindset.
Yeah.
And so the trick is to be listening for those kinds of indicators. They're talking as if they're going down in this ship.
Yeah.
They're not saying it, but it sounds that way to me.
Yeah.
So that would be one example.
Watching you do this in the past, it even occurs to me that you also listen for what's not being said.
Yes. Yes.
Which makes this really tricky. Huh.
Well, it is, because there's a little bit of second guessing. And of course, that comes out of the notion that people tend to experience things and think in terms of gestalts. We tend to put everything together to create wholes. And, the blind spot in your eye is actually your eye fills in a place where the retina comes in and you can't see something. So people have a tendency to not hear the whole that is there in the discussion, because they fill it in and they assume somebody meant it, or they fill it in for somebody else. But if you're listening for it and say, boy, that's strange. This person is that they've invited me in. They're now describing everybody that they think needs to come to the meeting, except Sally down the hallway. And Sally down the hallway is the person this particular manager can't deal with. Gee, I wonder why it was omitted in discussing it in the meeting. So it becomes a touchstone, not that you know exactly why it was omitted, could just be a slip in the mind, but it tells you to pay attention to and say, I wonder about this thing that you didn't say. I wonder about why something was omitted. I wonder why this particular thing isn't there, because normally people would talk about it. Normally it would come up. And that's, so you're listening for that. It's the other aspect of that is also listening for overemphasis. So it's really underlines, what I used to call underlines and holes in the conversation. Things where people are talking very loud about something. They're going on and on and on and on about the same thing. Like, why do they keep talking about the reorganization, the reorganization, the reorganization, the reorganization, and they haven't said anything about the strategy?
Yeah. I think, there are certain people, and I would count my oldest child among them, who are the kind that can go to a movie and walk out and spend the next 4 hours talking about all the subtleties and the meaning. And I'm not one of them. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about, for people like myself, what kind of practice or discipline or exercises can help me develop that kind of dialogic awareness that you're describing?
Well, that is a tricky one, because I have to admit that somehow all of this stuff was something I could do, and that I could train myself and develop more. But I could always sort of see it, and I was always surprised that people couldn't pick it up or not. I think, again, I'll go back to, part of it is they're talking as if. Part of it is whether or not you or other people are good at picking up symbolic notions of things. Symbolically, what did it mean when they smelled the flower? Symbolically, what did it mean when they drifted off? Symbolically, what did it mean with the fireworks in the background? To begin wondering about that kind of a thing, to see if it triggers anything. Some of it is watching something in terms of, gee, if I were the person writing the script for this, what's the point of the narrative? What am I trying to say, or what's being said here? And what else is being expressed besides the specific word content that is there? Is there something behind that? Is there some symbolic imagery behind it? Is there something else going on? And that gets tricky because to begin thinking about words or somehow conveying something that is perhaps otherwise non-conscious, unconscious, out of awareness or whatever else, but is being expressed. So the first part is actually to believe that there is something there. I know, Jerv, with you and I, part of the convincing there's something there is listening to me go on about something and say, oh my goodness, he might be seeing something here. So there may be something to this. I'm not seeing it, but maybe there's something there. And so the first part is believing that there is something there.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot in this book. A lot of people who are quite prestigious people in the field have said really nice things about the book and about this is an important contribution to our field. I hope those of you listening will pick it up, get a copy of the Dialogic Process Consulting, Generative Meaning Making in Action. Thanks for talking to me, Bob.
Thanks, Gervase.